I don't know about you, but for me, trying to grow an analytics practice in that linear fashion is very, very uh, tedious, I guess is the right word, right? In that it's like, it just seems really, really tedious to have to work through this. I can't start over here until I get all of this done.
Welcome to 33 Tangents, a weekly podcast featuring a rotating panel of co-hosts that all work together in the same company but live in different areas of the world. The discussions cover a wide variety of topics from digital analytics to working remotely to current happenings in business and technology. Our regular day-to-day conversations often go off in various directions, and the goal of this podcast is to share our ideas and find new ways to engage with others.
All right. So what's going on?
Same old. Crazy start to the year. Which, I mean, it's exciting, but then also, like, at times it gets, like the worry starts coming in because there's just so much people want to do. Everyone's coming back with so much energy, so you don't want to dampen that. You want to harness it, but at the same time, you don't want to quickly bite off more than you can chew, and then you end up falling short. So that's kind of my mindset as we approach the end of this week.
Into this week already. It's gone by so fast, and I thought this week wasn't a holiday week, was it? It was some kind of shortened week. I blinked and it's Friday already.
Yeah.
So that's that. Fix my hair. My mom FaceTimed me yesterday and told me to get a haircut.
Nice. So. Now, is she local to where you're at?
She lives about 70 miles north of me.
Okay, but it's not like across the country.
Fairly close. Kind of thing. No, she's a drive away. So
okay.
Yeah. So this is our first time back after the holidays.
Yeah, this is our first recording session of the new year.
How did little JP like Christmas?
Oh, he loved it. He's now full-fledged moving now. He's all over the place. We put him down and he's just moves. He finally figured out crawling and now he's already trying to stand up.
Yeah, I saw a picture the other day, and I think he's probably bigger than my 5-year-old at this point. It looks like.
I don't know, maybe. I mean, like because we he had a 9-month checkup last night, and he came in at like 19 pounds or something like that, and he's 20, 24 inches, maybe 25 inches.
Okay,
if I remember it,
just make him look a bit more older than he is.
Yeah, but like the hair is what makes him look older. The crazy hair, and now it's kind of grown in. You comb it to the side, he looks like a 3-year-old.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah,
that is fun.
But the holidays were good. Lots to do, lots to see. So, while it was a break, it wasn't necessarily a break.
Yeah. That's usually how it is. Lots of things to get to. Mine was fairly low key, which is my style. So, and I got a late Christmas present. Was it yesterday? No, 2 days ago. My next door neighbor, who's Hawaiian, invited me over to give me a lesson on how to make spam musubi.
Nice.
And he bought me a spam cutter that perfectly slices them to all consistent slices, and then this mold to make musubi. So I'm going to be making it tonight. I've done it before, but seeing an expert do it, I picked up a lot of tips and tricks. So It will be fun. So, topic.
So we've talked about this in passing previously, and I mean, like, if you think about the origin of this conversation is it's horrible. You encountered it firsthand, and now we're seeing wildfires across the country of Australia. Yeah, but after your experience, you drew some parallels for other areas of life. So the one being how forest fires spread, and then how you fight them. Because what I think you and I came to a conclusion on is both of those there's major misconceptions.
Yeah.
People think like a wall of fire just comes through, and that's not necessarily true. And then the term fighting fires has come to denote just everyone running around crazy trying to fix problems or get something done. And since you encountered it firsthand, you know that neither of those are accurate. um that they actually act differently. But then again, the parallels you can draw to business, to the industry that we're in, to your career. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic and a sad topic at the same time, especially where it impacts so many people. And what we had to deal with was, you look at the scale of the wildfires that the people in Australia are facing. It, I mean, it's nothing on that scale. I mean, it's just absolutely devastating and horrific to see. But yeah, a couple years ago, and we tend to have a good couple months of intense fires here in Utah every summer, late in the summer as things dry out, and it's always somewhere else. It's like, oh, that's horrible, but it's somewhere else. But two years ago, it was our turn to not have it be somewhere else, and kind of experienced that firsthand, and it was scary and a lot of the unknowns. But to your point, I learned a lot about wildfires, probably way more than I want to know about them at this point. And thankfully we avoided the fire. And if you followed some of my social stuff, unfortunately we didn't avoid all of the aftermaths. Last summer we got hit with a pretty big mudslide as a direct result of the fire, and got buried by between 5 and 10 feet of mud. Thankfully, didn't make it inside the house, but um, anyway, I learned a lot about forest fires. And it was always my misconception that you have this raging line of fire that kind of moves in a linear fashion, and as long as you stay out of the line of fire, you're okay, because that's how fires advance. And yeah, I learned that that wasn't the case. The fire was about a mile away, and it was. I don't know what else to describe it like other than like little missiles falling out of the sky. Where all these burning embers were flying and falling down right around the homes from the fire being a mile away, and the firefighters and the hot shots being diligent there to mop those up and clean them up. And as that happened, I learned that that's a natural progression of how forest fires move. It's not this linear line where it just grows out from the edges. In fact, these embers kind of shoot out, blown and propelled by the wind, and they start little spot fires. And it's those spot fires that then grow and
And
combine
merge.
and merge, and then merge with the larger fire, and that's how the fire moves. And you can really see this when the winds calm down, and you can really see it at night. And the firefighters, they say something like, the fire has laid down, which means it's kind of just sitting there. It's not moving. And the reason is that line isn't really what's pushing the fire drastically forward. So when conditions calm down, it just kind of sits there and kind of smolders. And it's only when the conditions are right to propel those spot fires out ahead of the larger fire that it actually makes progress in moving forward. So it's really interesting to learn about that. And we had, I can't remember what first brought it up, but we started drawing some analogies to just how things in general work, and how businesses work, and how we've thought about building and growing 33 sticks, and even taken some analogies with how we've partnered with our clients to help bring their data practices forward. And it's, I think we've all thought about it, whether we're growing a business or we're maturing an analytics practice, that it's this linear thing. And if you think back to some of the maturity models that some of the industry leaders in our space have put out, it's very much presented as this linear thing. You know, you grow from the edge of the fire, you go from A to B to C to D, and so many companies failed to grasp that. And I think one of the big reasons why is that's not how things move forward. You know, that's not how forest fires move forward. That's not how wildfires move forward. And that's not how businesses move forward. And really how they move forward is you have this leading edge, but then you kind of send out and you test things. You send out little spot fires here and there. And if things, you know, pick up and grow and merge with other things, that then pulls the rest of it forward. And we haven't really talked about it a lot externally, but internally we've come up with a methodology to capitalize on that concept of the spot fire, and we've called it the matrix internally. But it's this idea that a maturity model and the way that you mature, whether again it's a business or a practice within a business, that it's not this linear thing where you go from crawl to walk to run all at once, right? You mature little pieces of the business out in front of you, and that pulls everything forward. And it's been a really powerful tool for us to use, not only internally as we've matured and grown the 33.6 brand, but also as we've worked with our clients to really mature the way that they are using data in their businesses.
Yeah, and I mean, I think of that like I got it. A few things came back to me. A couple clients that we started working with a couple years ago. We were coming in and we were helping bring in a new analytics solution, and trying to get the entire organization to adopt it didn't work. So we had to pick champions, across the business and slowly, or potential champions, and slowly kind of bring them into the fold. And then they would drum up interest within their group, their team and it took 2 to 3 years for the org to really adopt it and use it. But it was trying to get outside of the immediate analytics team and the immediate users. It was going out and finding these individuals, because just telling everybody, okay, here's the system we're going to use now, and that approach wouldn't work.
Yeah, and I think I would love to come up with some examples we can share. I mean, I'm really comfortable talking about what we're doing internally at 33.6 because it is a lesson that we've had to learn. Again, when we first started the company, I took this approach of it has to be this linear thing, right? And we would throw these far distant goals out there, and then I would stand back and I'm like, why aren't we attaining and reaching these goals? And it's because we were trying to push forward in a very unnatural way. And as bad as the whole fire analogy is, it really is a good analogy to help visualize a way in which things naturally and organically progress. And in fact, we just got off of a company meeting today where that was kind of our focus, and said, one of the things we learned is we've set some really interesting, far-reaching goals in the past, and sometimes we've reached it, a lot of times we haven't. And one of the big things we learned is that we've tried to do this linear approach instead of taking a more spot fire approach, putting things out there and letting it grow and taking the time to organically grow it. So from a business standpoint, it has worked really well for us, and I'm really excited this year to see how taking a more structured approach in that manner is going to result in us hitting some really big stretch goals for the company. But I'm also really excited about formalizing this methodology with our clients. Again, I think we've used it here and there with a few of our clients, and it seems like every time we've really focused on taking that approach, it has yet to fail. And it just seems like such a natural, organic way to grow. And again, I think it's very counterintuitive to what we believe. And you can see that in the maturity models that our industry leaders have put out, and you can probably see it in your own thought process, whether it's professionally or personally in things that you've wanted to do to grow. That we've all thought it's this very methodical, linear path, and oftentimes it is absolutely the opposite of that.
So I'm going to get all what's the word to use? Maybe like new agey, and all motivational speakery. And I just coined that term. But if you think about it, like what you're saying is how you learn and how you progress is through failure. If you're successful at everything, you're not going to learn, and you're not going to progress forward. You're just going to continue to do the same thing. Think about it, like, would a movie be interesting, and would you care about a character that never failed, that always succeeded? Probably not. You're not going to cheer for them. You're not going to invest in that character if they're flawless. You're going to invest in that character if they're flawed. Maybe they share the same flaws as you. So getting back to what you were talking about, like, because when you talk that way, I see a line graph where it's like up, down, up, down, up, down, where the overall trend is trending up. But you have some ups, you have some downs. Those downs are maybe times that you tripped and had to learn, and you were able to move forward from that learning.
Yeah, and I think there's some memes out there where they say, this is what people think of an entrepreneur's path, and it's like this straight line from nothing to, billionaire.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have another one where it's like this up, down, squirrely lines, backtrack to the beginning. This is what it's really like. And that is definitely the case. And man, I have this memory burned into my head, and I don't know if I've shared it on previous podcasts, but I want to say I was 6 or 7 when I first started learning how to snow ski, and I learned at a resort in Utah, a little resort in, I think, Ogden, Weber Canyon, called Nordic Valley, and I don't know, maybe it was my second or third lesson. I was on the bunny slope, and I had gotten to the point where I was going to the top by myself on the lift, coming down and meeting my instructor at the bottom, and I was doing it every time. And I felt really good about myself that I'd go up, come down, go up, come down, like, I'm doing it. And I get down one time, and my instructor had this really, really almost upset look on his face. And I'm like, well, I'm crushing this, man. He's like, dude, how are we going to ever make it off the bunny hill if you never fall? You're not pushing yourself. You're not trying new techniques. You're not doing anything to get better. So yeah, you may never fall, but we're never going to get off this basic hill if you keep coming down the mountain like that.
Yeah. Well, think about it. The ultimate paradox is, well, knowing what I know now, I would never do that again. If you never did, if you went back and didn't do it, you wouldn't know what you know now. Back in my late 20s, I made a few really big mistakes that took a few years to dig out of. And it took me a couple years to come to the realization that, because at first it's like, wow, I would never do that again, knowing what I know now. But then all of a sudden there was this moment of clarity. It's like, well, I wouldn't know what I know now if I didn't do that.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm wondering. I think it kind of covers so many different things, and we started off talking about this is how we think about building a business, or this is how we think about maturing a client. But I think it's relevant in so many different things, and I'm wondering if we think back, to being employed somewhere else, and maybe we're doing the dreaded quarterly review of where we hit in our goals, if we restructure those to be a little bit more like that, right? Those reviews and the way we look at employee progressions, again, tend to be this linear straight line. We want you to go from A to B, but it's so unnatural and so unrealistic. Do we change the way in which we engage with our employees and help them grow and know that it's not a linear path?
And many times, if you think about it, they punish mistakes, so that makes your employees risk averse.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies, back to my very first job out of college, they forced a bell curve the way they rated all their employees. So there had to be a set number of. It was horrific. There were a set number of what they called high performers, and they were the ones that were eligible for bonuses. There were a set number of low performers, and they were kind of put on notice that if they didn't improve, they would be let go. And then the most of the staff was just this fat part of the curve that was performing. And I'm going to be honest, I think there are probably a few people, I don't know if it's for the good of the company, that try to get into that high performer group, but I think most of the really smart people just wanted to stay off the radar. I think it had the unintended effect of pushing really smart people not to really achieve what they were capable of, simply because they wanted to be off the radar, because mistakes were seen as a bad thing and
Hmm.
punished. And it's better to go down the mountain and not fall. Which, looking back on it, it is unfortunate, because you're right. I think if we look at our progression as professionals, I think most of my major leap forwards can be tied to massive mistakes, or things I wish I would have done differently. But had I done so, do I give up that opportunity to learn and grow? Probably. I probably do.
Hmm. Well, I mean, even as something as simple as this podcast, we don't have those rigid quarterly reviews, and it's like, did you get closer to this goal or did you get closer to that goal? Because I've been part of that, and the billable rate and the utilization rate were part of the goals. Instead of it being metrics and ways to measure how you were contributing, they were the goals themselves. So with those being goals, you couldn't find ways to carve out time to do something else, and if you
Yeah.
did, it was carving out time on the weekend.
Yeah, and I think it's an unfortunate and in most cases unintended consequence of some of those models. And if we go back to the analogy we started this conversation with the fire, it's very short term focused, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of these things are very short term, looking at the edge of the fire. We want to look at the edge of progression because that's here and now. But the larger growth, the larger value back to both the individual and the company, comes from those spot fires that are out there in the future. But we have to be willing to look past today. And it's an unfortunate part of so many businesses. And I don't know if the culprit is Wall Street or what it is, but we've focused way too much on the leading edge of the fire, and it's what is happening today rather than, but where are we going to go tomorrow? And we've looked to maximize quarterly profits over long-term stability and growth. I recently met with my financial advisor. It's part of the bank that I've been banking with since, geez, I think I opened my account in '96 with them. And there was some big news locally that they were going through a pretty sizable layoff within the bank. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So I did some research, and I looked, they're a public company. And so I looked at their financials, and I'm like, they in 2019 they netted $820 million net
Wow.
after
Okay.
all expenses, everything paid, net $820 million. It was short of shareholder expectations. Stock price dropped. In order to address the short-term problem, the CEO said, well, we're going to cut costs by letting people go. I'm like, this is crazy. Am I crazy here? Like, you're maximizing the short term for long. Now, maybe there was fat to be cut. Maybe there were things to do, but this whole short term way of thinking just goes against, again, everything that I've seen in nature of how things naturally and organically grow. And to force these short term gains just seems to be a really, really hard way to do business. And maybe a few people at the top get rich and a few shareholders rejoice, but the rest of us in the system end up being pretty miserable.
And to that too, part of the short term, or like Wall Street driving the short term, I think it's also, we've talked about this multiple times. It's management having to be done down to the lowest common denominator. You know,
Yeah.
it, and it's um and actually maybe this isn't a cause for the look of the short term. It's actually it's a result. So maybe I'm jumping ahead. So let's come back to this, because
Hey, but
originally I
that's
was
how
thinking.
that's how forest fires grow. They jump ahead.
Because what I was thinking is you have you have this management down to the lowest common denominator. So my wife's a school teacher, and they have their sick day policy. They have a couple personal days a year because school's closed for 3 months out of the year. In her school, a couple people abuse the sick policy, and in most places You call out when you're sick, and then if you don't call out, they expect you to come in. Well, instead of addressing those people that are abusing the sick policy, because, and sometimes they just wouldn't call out, um, you also, if you call out one day, you have to call out the day before you're returning. So say you got like, the 24-hour stomach bug, you call out in the morning, you have to call by the end of the day to say, oh yeah, I'll be back tomorrow, just so they know. And I'm like, that makes absolutely no sense. So everybody has to deal with this inane policy. And we just need everybody to do this because these few people can't follow the rules.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a big discussion we can have a
Mhm.
whole episode on. But you're right. I mean, I think it's an unfortunate part of how things grow. And when you look at, again, at things growing in a linear fashion, I think oftentimes that becomes the default way of doing management rather than
Mhm.
thinking ahead, projecting ahead, and growing the company in that way. To say it's lazy probably isn't fair, but I think to call it default is a fair summary of why that gets put into place, and why businesses end up operating that way. And again, maybe it makes a few people successful and happy and rich, but
Mhm.
for the most part, I know very few people that enjoy working in those type of environments.
Yeah, they feel like they're treated like cattle.
Yeah. It's no way to work.
No.
I want to challenge you to put on your, since this is kind of your day to day. I want to challenge you to put on your guide hat, and I want you to think about if let's say a new analytics manager came to you and said, "Hey Jim, I'm taking over this practice. They have a lot of expectations for me. I've read a lot of material that's been blogged about over the years about maturity curves, and it looks like I go from data collection to I build dashboards, then I do analysis, then I stand up an optimization program, then I do personalization. Going back to these things that we've learned, that's not really how things progress. What would your advice be as an advisor, as a guide to that analytics manager, to say, I want to challenge you to think a little bit differently about how you would mature your program?
Hmm. The first thing is chances are that person's coming in and seeing, like what industry leaders are saying is like the way to go. So if you immediately come in and say no, that's not the way to go, you're challenging them directly instead of challenging their information. So I think they'll hold to it. So I wouldn't necessarily say no, throw it out the window. Here's another way to look at it. What I would say is yes, that's a good broad thing to look at. But again, then start the conversation around this isn't a linear path, and introduce the concept of each of those. They're not steps, they're not milestones, they're categories. They're categories to address, and some you can address sooner rather than later. Some you can address faster. Some take longer. And then there's also prerequisites. Like you can't immediately jump to say personalization without ensuring that you have the most basic of data integrity. So what I would say is, don't look at those as steps or milestones or goals. Think of those as categories. And so let's assess where things are at today, and then break those categories down into subcategories. Chunk them down to make them much more easily digestible. Because again, like you look at a big goal such as personalization, and personalization driven on, I'm going to be really aggressive and really cliche, real-time personalization driven on first party data that we collect on a user. So as a user's browsing the site, we want to know what's going on so we can tailor the experience immediately. That's a massive undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
um, if you were to try to bite that off right away, you're not really ever going to get started, because it's there are so many things that go into that, and chances are many of those pieces are either missing or they're incomplete. So if you're saying that's my ultimate goal, you're going to fail right off the bat, or you're going to feel like you're failing 3 months and you're not going to get very far. So if you go back to let's break these major things down, forget them as milestones, they're categories, break them into subcategories. Let's assess where the organization's at. Let's do that, and then let's start building out a map to get there with actual milestones,
Hmm.
because you actually want to build in milestones so that that analytics manager can go to their stakeholders, their leadership, and say, here's our plan. Here's where we're going to be in 3 months. And these are the capabilities that we're going to have. And then 3 months after that, these are the capabilities we plan to unlock. So at that point, you're able to keep your leadership happy that you're constantly getting new things while marching to that incredibly aggressive goal of real-time personalization based on data that they collect on user behavior.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that a little bit because I think this whole concept of moving in a nonlinear fashion, and again, going back and tying this in with our analogy of spot fires, I think being able to grow in that way has two really strong advantages when you look at it from that perspective. Number one, from a just a personal perspective, I don't know about you, but for me, trying to grow an analytics practice in that linear fashion is very, very uh, tedious, I guess is the right word, right? In that it's like, it just seems really, really tedious to have to work through this. I can't start over here until I get all of this done. And again, I just think the reason it feels tedious is it's very unnatural because, of course, the baseline, the foundation needs to be the focus, but that isn't to say you can't start pushing up some of the other components down the stream in parallel. So I think from a personal perspective, it helps keep the job a lot fresher, and just is more fulfilling. Uh, I think more importantly, it addresses one of the concerns that I hear from executives all the time, and that is executives always want to run faster,
Mm-hmm.
always go faster, and I think they've grown tired of this kind of outdated maturity model where it's this very linear path, and in 9 months we're going to start making progress on the things that are interesting to me. So if we can take more of this spot fire approach and work on the foundational pieces, but still, we're going to start moving things up in insights, we're going to start touching on a few things in optimization, and you know what, even though we're probably 9 months out, we're going to start lighting up a few things in personalization within a couple of months. Uh, that keeps your stakeholders invested and happy because they're tired of hearing that we'll get there, but we're not going to start showing you any kind of results or even turning on the lights in this personalization category until a year from now. They just don't want to hear it. And again, I wasn't a believer in that. I believed in this very linear model early on, but I've thrown it out. I just don't think it's natural, and I just don't think it's a healthy way to progress. So I think taking the Spotfire approach addresses two very real needs that from a personal perspective, you got to keep this interesting. And from a professional perspective, your stakeholders don't want to hear that you're not going to start turning on some of those things they're interested about until a year from now.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to build traction with them is every couple of months delivering new features, new capabilities, and ultimately those it's not the actual action of enabling those features and capabilities, it's being able to solve business problems. We've solved this, we can now do this regardless of what the actual feature is we're we're able to send an email to a customer within 3 hours of taking this custom action on our site, right? Like if you can bring in an abandoned cart solution, and if you're an e-commerce shop that they can send an email within an hour. Everyone's able to do that these days. I think that was revolutionary 8 years ago, being able to send an abandoned cart email that quickly. Um, Now I just don't want to send an abandoned cart email. I want to send an email an hour after a visit where, with 3 products a person viewed, or I'm a publisher. And so, an hour after someone comes in and follows a new topic that, on our site, I want to send an email with our top read articles within that topic to make sure that they're interested and come back. Like those kind of things where it's not saying, well, we enabled this feed that sends this data to this place and it processes it, and we enabled this API call which enables us to get the data so much faster. No, it's we're able to connect with a customer after performing this custom event within an hour.
Yeah. So let's dig into that a little bit more, and talk from your personal experience. And we don't need to talk about maybe specific clients by name or example, but maybe some of the learnings you've had from it. Again, you've been with us a long time. When we started out, we kind of took that very linear. A fire grows from the edge. A client progresses very linear. We took that approach with our clients, and it was maybe halfway through your tenure where we had these insights to make this pivot to the matrix, and grow in more of a spot fire approach. What has been your experience with clients where we've made that shift and walked away from the linear maturity model, to the matrix model that you've used with your clients?
I mean, it's all positive. I'll say one of the key reasons being is we've had time to build rapport with them. And so, I mean, I think that's key because it goes against the grain, there needs to be a level of rapport or weight behind what you say. But the clients where we've introduced that, it's there's been a level of embrace, and I think I know we've seen an acceleration in what we've been able to enable them to do. Um, because instead of saying we have, with a linear approach, it's we have to have everything done here before we can even touch here, or we need to get these two steps completed before we can get to the third one. With the matrix approach, with that spotfire approach, we're able to start reaching out and saying, okay, yes, we're still staying on step 2, but let's start, poking away at things on step 4. Let's start laying the foundation there. And then that gets people excited to say, okay, we're starting to reach out into new areas, and it brings people in, and that's what helps build momentum.
Yeah. And I would tell you anecdotally, it's changed the mix of our business with the types of projects that we do. And I don't know that we can map it back directly to taking this new approach to maturity, but I think it's definitely a key part of it. When we started the company, 90% plus of our engagements were pure implementation projects. Now, the majority of our work doesn't have an implementation component, and when it does, it's not a standalone. It's part of unlocking larger initiatives that the businesses we work with are looking to do with their data. So I think anecdotally, adopting this new methodology of maturing our clients has raised the stakes and raised kind of the level that we're positioned at within the organizations that we work in. And I think that that's a plus for everybody, right? And not to downplay implementation at all. It's a very critical piece of what we do. But you and I came up in the implementation ranks, and the thing that I hated the most about implementation was feeling like my job didn't matter. There was no connection to what all this work is enabling. What is it doing? And I think elevating the conversation and being able to spot those fires out there and say that, this is enabling things and this actually has meaning. I'm doing something of value. I know it's made our jobs more enjoyable, but I know for a fact it's made the clients that we work with, the people that we work with, it's made their jobs more enjoyable because we've taken them from just working on tasks, capturing data and variables, to now they're doing something meaningful that's enabling the company to sell more products, provide a richer experience.
And if you think about
And
it,
it's exciting.
yeah, and also with the similar folks, it's not just the data collection, but the distribution. Because if you think about it on the flip side too, a lot of people, like, once the data is wired up, they get stuck in the basic report distribution or wiring up, very generic dashboards. It's some of the questions are, okay, how do you want to use this data? And of course, the initial thing is well, we need to wire up some dashboards. Okay, but where can we go from there? Who else can we get? Who else can we send this data to? We've got rules collecting it for one vendor. What's not to say we don't piggyback off of that logic and send it to another vendor that can supplement your email campaigns or supplement your display campaigns. I think back to 10 years ago, a client I was working with, we spent, this is also in the early days of tag management systems. So one was not in play with this project. Everything was instrumented through the page code of the site, major retailer.
Mm-hmm.
So we spend months in discovery, months in development. We finally launch this incredibly advanced implementation. And so I asked the question, like, okay, so what's next with this data we're now collecting? And it's like, well, dashboards, and some scheduled reports. And it's like, well, where else can we send this data to? We're collecting all of this, and if you're just looking at using reports, for example, going back to how can we personalize the site? This is one specific use case, but at the time I was like, okay, so you've got a report that tells you how people are engaging with, say, a product detail page. By the time you notice some strange behavior and actually analyze it, the time has passed. The time to act on it has passed. So, how can we use this data now to help, inform right away that either something's wrong or people aren't engaging with the page in the way you did. And again, I'm getting way into the weeds at the moment, but like that's always been something that's always stuck with me.
Yeah. I love this concept. And it does, it applies to so many different areas, not only in business, but in life. And it's something that I've really adopted. And one of the things that I've struggled with a lot, and again, I probably mentioned this, is that, I have some really big destinations that I want to get to. It's the how do I get there piece where I tend to break down. And I think the biggest part of my struggle is trying to look at it in a very linear fashion, that I have to master all of the basic things before I touch any of the intermediate things. And then I have to master all the intermediate before I master the advanced. And again, it's just not a very natural way of progression. And we've had Evan Lapointe on the podcast a couple times, a really, really interesting conversation every time he's on. But I've been working with him personally to kind of help me a bit. And one of the things that he's provided me with is this concept of taking this growth by spot fire analogy and applying it to my personal life and some of the things that I've wanted to accomplish. And it was a huge insight that he gave me, is that, again, most things don't progress in this strictly linear fashion. It's okay to put your focus on being a beginner right now, but you can experiment with some things in the intermediate realm. You can start playing with a few advanced techniques, and that's how you're really going to pull your practice forward. Again, whether it's something you're working on professionally or something that you're trying to master personally. So, I've been really trying to put that into play. I've been trying to put that in play. I played the piano since I was like 8, but just off and on, and I've kind of put a more dedicated approach to my practice, and I've kind of used that technique, but I've just used it across the board in trying to accomplish some really, really far out things that I've been stuck on, because I've been stuck in this mindset that I have to progress in just a pure linear fashion. So it's been super helpful, and I would just put a plug out for Evan if you want to be if you want to become a superhuman. He's doing some really cool things with companies with his new company core, around being superhuman and developing that into the culture of companies. You should definitely reach out to him. But for me personally, it's been really transformative, and I think that's been reflected in 33 Sticks and how we've looked at growing the business. And hopefully you as an employee have seen that as a very positive thing that we've learned and changed in how we've structured the growth of the company.
Mm-hmm. No, I would agree with that, and this is definitely not kissing your ass. I try to give you honest feedback. No, I've definitely seen a pivot in the last year and a half where it's focusing. Are we taking on the engagements that are going to challenge us? Are we taking on the right engagements? Are we trying to be everything to everybody? Because, that doesn't work out for anyone in the end.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. And again, I think the default is to be, well, let's grow at the edge, and then eventually conditions change and you burn out, right?
Yeah.
I like challenging ourselves. I like throwing those spot fires out in front of us and seeing what we can grow into. Some flame out, but the ones that pick up momentum and merge with other things tend to be the things that really help pull our company forward. And I really like looking at it both from a company perspective and an individual perspective, because it is such a natural way of progressing things. So, I think that's the biggest takeaway. And this conversation kind of meandered in different areas that I didn't expect it to take, but I think it was valuable to hit on these topics. But I think I just keep coming back to this concept that the biggest thing that I've learned over the past couple of years, and you mentioned like maybe the last 16 months or so, that's when this thing really started to click for me, is that my mindset of a pure linear progression is just counter to the way things are grow in a more natural sense, and adopting this mindset of allowing to kind of have the base of what you're trying to grow, your focus, but your real growth is throwing things out in front of you and letting things stick and grow, and you grow into that. It's really been transformative, again, for us as 33 Sticks and for me personally.
Yeah. And you thought I was crazy when I said, let's start a podcast.
I did think you were crazy. But to be fair, everyone thought you were crazy. So
most people still think I'm crazy.
You were the one that believed in it, and it's I don't know what episode we are on now.
This is episode 90.
It's crazy, right? And people listen.
Yeah, we love it. Thank you. We appreciate our listeners.
No, seriously, it's amazing. People listen, and I hope that means that they're at least getting some entertainment, but hopefully some valuable nuggets that they can take and apply to their personal life, apply to their professional life, and hopefully, be a little bit better, strive to do a little bit more, get a little bit more enjoyment out of their job. That's what we hope is happening.
Yep. So I think that's a good spot to wrap up on.
Agreed. And I just dropped it. Sorry, your wife made me, the little 33 Sticks logo on the 3D printer.
Yeah.
And it's my fidget thing.
Nice.
So
nice. Cool.
Well, good chat.
Yep. Good chat. We'll wrap up there, and we'll catch everybody later.
See ya.
See ya. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of 33 Tangents. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate and review the show on your favorite podcast aggregator so others can find us. If you would like to reach us, you can do so by emailing podcast@33sticks.com or on the web at 33tangents.33sticks.com. 33 Tangents is a production of 33 Sticks, an analytics boutique.